everyone. In this session we are going to discuss about the superpower of the south, that is the Vijayanagara Empire, which ruled from 14th to 16th century. As the name Vijayanagara means the city of victory, it was the name of the city as well as of the empire, which was founded in 14th century, and its peak time it stretched from the river Krishna in the north to extreme south in the peninsula. So, Vijayanagara was the name of the city and empire. Founded in 14th century, it was superpower empire of south, and in its peak time it stretched from its rule stretched from river Krishna in north to extreme south of peninsula. This is about the Vijayanagara Empire. Now, talking about how this empire was discovered, let's discuss that. It was discussed in 1800th century. Discovery. It was discovered in 18th century by an engineer and antiquarian, Colonel Colin Mackenzie, who worked in English East Indian Company. It was discovered by engineer and antiquarian, a person who loves to collect all the antiques and history, by Colonel Colin Mackenzie. And he discovered about the Vijayanagara Empire through the ruins of Hampi. Through the ruins of Hampi. So, Hampi was one source of discovery, and he prepared the first survey map of this site. So, Colonel Colin Mackenzie prepared first survey map of this site. He got the basic information about the kingdom through the memoirs of the priest of the temples in Hampi, and the two famous temples that were Virupaksha temple and the shrine of Pampa Devi, on whose name the name Hampi is based. So, he got his basic information from memoirs of the priest of Virupaksha temple, shrine of Pampa Devi, and the name Hampi is based on the goddess Pampa Devi. So, this is one source. This was how it was discovered first. In 1836, epigraphists began collecting several dozen inscriptions found at these temples in Hampi and other temples in Hampi. So, the second source of discovery was in 1836 by epigraphists who collected inscriptions from the temples in Hampi. Next, the third source were the account of foreign travelers, which is always one of the major sources of knowing about a kingdom. The accounts of foreign travelers who visited during the reign of Vijayanagar kings. So, one traveler was the ambassador who was sent by the ruler of Persia, that was Abdur Razak. Abdur Razak, who was sent by ruler of Persia. And the second traveler was a Portuguese traveler called Barbosa. So, Barbosa and Abdur Razak, they were few travelers whose accounts are used to construct history. Barbosa, this is the third source. And lastly, the fourth source is the literature which existed during that period. So, literature is also one major source through which we can construct history of the place of the empire, of the kingdom. So, literature. And since the literature was written in different languages, historians can conveniently construct the history of this empire. So, the literature was written in Telugu, Kannada, Tamil and Sanskrit. So, this is the fourth source of knowing the empire. Next, we come to know about the positions that existed during the empire. The society positions that existed. So, according to the hierarchy, there existed the king. The rulers which ruled the Vijayanagara Empire were called Rayas. So the kings were called Rayas. First, the king known as the Rayas which were present. Second comes the Sultan. That were living near the adjoining areas of the Vijayanagara Empire, that were the Sultan of Deccan, the Golconda and Bijapur. Third come the Nayaks. They were the military chief. And held an eminent position in the society, Nayaks. And fourth comes the traders. Since Vijayanagar was a very flourishing kingdom, there were inflow of traders also and demand of exotic goods also. So traders were also rich, wealthy merchants. So this was the society, the position. The Vijayanagar kingdom was originally founded by two brothers called Harihara and Bukka in 1336. So Harihara and Bukka, they were two brothers who founded the Vijayanagara Empire in 1336. And in their empire there were people who spoke different languages and followed different traditions also. So there were people from different religious traditions who followed different religious traditions and who spoke different languages, and that is why we see literature in different languages. This also means that the kings were tolerant and they had cordial relations with other people who followed other religious traditions. The contemporary ruler of the Vijayanagar kings were the sultans of the Deccan in the north and Gajapati rulers of Odisha. So in the north their contemporary rulers were, in north there the contemporary rulers to Vijayanagar kings were sultans of Deccan and Gajapati rulers of Odisha. And the reason for the conflict was, the reason of the conflict between them was the fertile area that existed, that was in the valley, and the prosperous lucrative overseas trade. since these were the port cities. The conflict main reason was the fertile agricultural land and the lucrative overseas trade. And as we all know that trade and commerce brings revenue in the kingdom. It's a major source of revenue. So, lucrative overseas trade, which also means that these cities were the port cities. But at the same time, interaction between these states led to sharing of ideas, especially in the field of architecture. So, there was sharing of ideas also, as I said that there was cordial relationship between the sultans and the Vijayanagar kings, sharing of ideas with respect to architecture. As in the Vijayanagar kingdom, we see the use of arched gateways, the use of dome on the gates. This is borrowed from the sultans. So, arc on gateways. We find dome. This is all inspired as by them. But the rulers of Vijayanagar borrowed concepts and building techniques which they developed further. That means they also put their input when they were building their architecture. In the south, Vijayanagar kings acquired incorporated the Cholas of Tamil Nadu and the Hoysalas in Karnataka. So, in the south their rule was Cholas in Tamil Nadu and Hoysalas in Karnataka, which were both of them were very powerful states. The ruling elites, that were the Naikas in this area, they extended patronage to elaborate temples such as the Brihadeshwara temple at Tanjavur and Chennakeshava temple in Bellur. So, they were present. Along with them, we got the Vijayanagar kingdom, got the territory as well as the ruling elites of these places. These were the Naikas also, and these Naikas, they extended their patronage to elaborate temples. Example, temple in Tanjavur, Chinna Keshava temple and in Belur, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. And the rulers of Vijayanagar also built traditions on these temples and carried them. So their traditions were also based on these temples. So this means that temples were also very important place of learning, tradition, culture. Next we come to know about the traders. The fourth position was the traders. As the warfare during these times depended upon effective cavalry, the import of horses from Arabia and Central Asia was very important for rival kingdoms. So, during this period, what the most important source of military fight was the cavalry. And this was, that means the horses, and this was the state animal also of Vijayanagar kingdom, horse. So these horses were imported from Arabia and Central Asia. Arabia and Central Asia, and therefore there were Arab traders who they controlled the trade of cavalry. And the local communities of merchants known as Kudirai Chetty or horse merchants also participated in these exchanges. So the local community traders also participated, known as Kudirai Chetty, also participated in the trade of horse. So they were also important. But from 1498, other actors also appeared in the scene. So from 1498, we find other actors also, and who were those? That was the advent of Portuguese. So with the advent of Portuguese in India, they also participated in the trade. They entered from the west coast of Calicut, west coast of subcontinent, that is Calicut. Calicut in Kerala, and they attempted to establish trading and military stations. So they also wanted to be part of the trade and earn revenue. They established trading and military stations. So they also wanted to establish themselves and become powerful, and that is why they chose a port city where they can continue with the trade. There they had superior military technology and the use of muskets, which enabled them to become important players in the tangled politics of the period. So, because of their advanced military technology and the use of musket, that was a gun, they gained an important position as a player in the society. Since there was incorporation and immigration of traders and Portuguese and so many people, so many important Nayakas also, the market of Vijayanagar was very flourishing, and therefore it dealt in various exotic goods, that was the spices, textiles and precious stones, and there was demand also of these exotic goods, and it became as a symbol of status. So, the market of Vijayanagar was quite flourishing, and since there was inflow of traders and people from all over place, there was textile market, there was demand of textile, there was demand of spices, there was demand of precious stone and jewelry, and these things were status symbol. The revenue derived from trade in turn contributed significantly to the prosperity of the city. So, the revenue, that means the revenue was huge, that led to the prosperity of the city. Now, we have discussed about the traders, the sultans. Let's now discuss the Nayakas, the administration during Vijayanagar period. What was the administration? The military chief exercised an immense amount of power in the empire, and they usually controlled forts and had armed supporters. So, military chief exercised power and they controlled forts and had armed support also. So they were supplied with arms also, and they often moved from one place to another, and in many cases they were accompanied by peasants looking for fertile land on which they can settle. So they moved from place to another along with peasants, so that wherever they find fertile land, they can settle on in that area. And these chiefs were known as the Nayakas, which I have already told in the previous slide. And they usually spoke Telugu and Kannada. So these Nayakas, they usually spoke Telugu and Kannada. That means they knew the vernacular language so that they can connect with the people. And these Nayakas submitted to the authority of the kings of Vijayanagar, but they often rebelled as they had immense amount of power to exercise. They could move from one place to another, so they wanted to have their own kingdom, own place of ruling, but they were subdued by military actions by the kings. So whenever they rebelled, they were subdued by military actions. This was one way where kings showed his power, authority in case of rebel. Next comes the Amar Nayaka system, which was a major political innovation of the Vijayanagara Empire. The Nayaka system, this was major political innovation of Vijayanagara Empire. The feature of Amar Nayaka system of administration was very much similar to that of the Ikta system from the Delhi Sultanate. So the features were similar to Ikta system of Delhi Sultanate. This also shows the influence of sultans. These Amar Nayak were the military commanders who were given territories to govern by the Raya, the king, and they collected tax and other dues from peasants, traders, craft persons in that area. So basically they were military commanders who governed the area which was given by king. And they also collected taxes from peasants traders and craft persons. They kept the revenue, a part of revenue for their personal use and the rest for maintaining a stipulated contingent of horses and elephants. So, with the revenue they collected, they kept a part of it for personal use and the rest of revenue for maintaining stipulated contingent of horses and elephant, that means the cavalry and infantry. And these contingents provided the Vijayanagar king with an effective fighting force with which they brought the entire southern peninsula under their control. So, as I told, this is for cavalry and infantry. So, because of these contingent, they could capture whole of the south of the peninsula. And some of the revenue was also used for the maintenance of temples and irrigation work. So, the revenue was also used for temples, which was also an important place of learning and irrigation. This shows the flourishing agriculture also, irrigation facilities. This shows this was learning center, culture, rich culture. Temples are symbol of rich culture and irrigation means flourishing agriculture. The Amar Naika sent tribute to the king annually and personally appeared in the royal court with gifts to express their loyalty. So, the Amar Naika, they sent tribute annually and kings occasionally asserted their control over them by transferring them from one place to another. That means their position was transferable. However, by the end of the 17th century, many of these Amar Naikas, they established their own independent kingdoms. That was one reason for the downfall of the Vijayanagara Empire. Now, we studied about the administration of the empire. Let's discuss the Vijayanagar as the capital, about the structure, about the architecture, about the capital and the topography and geography of the kingdom. So, we will study about the surroundings of Vijayanagar Empire. The Vijayanagara Empire was very strategically located. It was located on the natural basin of the river Tungabhadra, which flows in a northeasterly direction, and because of that, the basin, the landscape is characterized by stunning granite hills that seem to form like a girdle around the city, and number of streams also flow down from the rocky outcrops. So, it was located on the basin of river Tungabhadra, and since it is like a valley, it was surrounded by granite hills and a number of streams also flowed from these rocky outcrops. So, that means there was presence of precious stones. Granite is a precious stone, and streams, number of streams means there was no scarcity of water in that particular area. In most all cases, embankments were built along these streams, which created reservoirs of various sizes. So, as there were number of streams, the embankments were constructed on these streams, and reservoirs were made of varying sizes. Elaborate arrangements were also made to store rainwater and conduct it to the city. So, there was collection of rainwater, as there were few areas that were present in the arid area of the peninsula. So, there was, and this water was used to conduct to the city. And tanks were also built. The tanks were built in the early years of the 15th century and is now called the Kamalapuram tank. So, tanks were also constructed around 15th century, and one such important tank is known as the Kamalapuram tank. And the water from this tank was not only used for irrigation but was also conducted through a channel to the royal center. So, this water was used for irrigation and this water was sent to royal, where the kings and elite resided. One of the most prominent water work to be seen among the ruins is the Harihara Canal. So, Harihara Canal it was built by the rulers of Sangam dynasty. this canal drew water from the dam across the Tungabhadra, that means the dam was built across the Tungabhadra river, and it irrigated the valley that separated the sacred center from the urban core. So it was built on Tungabhadra river and irrigated area between the sacred center and urban core. The sacred center means the temple, and the urban core where there were buildings and the traders resided. This was about the geography. There were lot of construction of fort and roads also during the Vijayanagar kingdom period. Fortification was there. There were construction of forts. Abdul Razak, which was an ambassador sent by the ruler of Persia to Calicut in the 15th century, he was greatly impressed as he tells us about the fortifications and mentioned 7 lines of forts. So Abdul Razak he mentions about the 7 lines of forts. That means there was one fort and it was encircled by the 7 lines, and these encircled not only the city but also its agricultural hinterlands and forest. That means the agricultural tract was also in an enclosed area and it was not open for anybody else. So the outermost wall linked the hills surrounding the city. So even the hills were connected to the city and they were not the that means nobody can enter the kingdom as it was guarded by the walls by the 7 lines of forts. And no mortar or cementing agent was employed anywhere in the construction. So these forts, in the construction of these forts, no mortar or cementing agent was and the stone blocks, they were cut in wedge shape so that they can fit into each other, and therefore there was no use of mortar or cementing agent. Since the stone blocks were made into wedge shape, they could without any cementing or agent or mortar. And the inner portion of the walls was of earth packed with rubbles. So the inner walls were made of packed rubbles. And the outer outlook of the construction looked in the shape of square or rectangle. The most significant part of the fortification was the enclosure of agricultural tracts. This was a strategic move to enclose the agricultural tract into the area of forts in the fortified area. Abdul Razak noted that between the first, second and third wall there are cultivated fields, gardens and houses. So there was the most important was enclosure of fortified area. Now, why agricultural land was incorporated within the fortified area? What was the strategic move for this? Why? Often the objective of the sieges in the medieval area was to starve the defenders into submission, so that the sieges could last for several months and several years also. So, to starve the enemy so that they can submit to the king. This was the move during the medieval period. This was for sieges. And for the kingdom to be prepared for such a situation, there were large granaries were built within the fortified areas. So, large granaries were also constructed to be prepared for tough situations. The rulers of Vijayanagara kingdom, they adopted more expensive and elaborate strategy as they inculcated the entire agricultural belt within the fortified area. So, the entire agricultural field in the fortified area. And Abdul Razak also tells us about that between the first, the second and the third wall of fort, they were present the gardens, the agricultural field and houses. So, Abdul Razak, that within the first, second and third, there were present agricultural field, cultivated field, and there were houses also and gardens. So, this was an expensive strategy that was adopted by the Vijayanagar kings. The second line of fortification was around the inner corner of the urban complex. So, this was around the inner corner of the urban complex. This was the urban complex. And the third line surrounded by the royal center, within which each set of major buildings was surrounded by its own high wall. So, there was the royal centers were in the third wall of fortification. One was the king, second was the urban complex, third was the royal center with high walls. And the fort was entered through a well guarded gates which linked the city to the major road. That means nobody could enter the kingdom without the permission. So, it was well guarded with, there was a gate and that was the fort. So, this was guarded, and the gateways, there was the construction of gateways, like this is a gateway. They were a distinctive architectural feature of Vijayanagara Empire. It defined the structure to which they regulated the access. So, that means according to the structure of this gateway, we could recognize which structure they were regulating and how important that structure was. The arc on the gateway leading into the fortified settlement, as I am shown this arc, it was like this arc, the gateway was like a entry arc, and the dome over the gate are regarded as typical features of the architecture introduced by Turkish sultans. So, this arc and the dome is like this, dome, it was from Turkish sultan. It was introduced by them, but according to art historians, they refer this style as Indo-Islamic. So, this was Indo-Islamic style of architecture, as Vijayanagar kings were open to the ideas, especially with respect to architecture. Now, talking about the roads, next after forts, that were the road that play an important role in connecting the city. Roads. Archaeologists have studied roads within the city and those leading out from the city. So the roads were present within the city and those roads led to the outer part of the city. So they were present. And which led to outside of city. And archaeologists have got to know about these roads through the tracing paths that were identified through gateways and as well as by finds of pavements. So pavements have been found. Pavements were there and the roads were built around the valley, but they avoided the rocky terrain. So the roads were built on the plain surface only. And some of the most important roads extended from temple gateways and were lined by bazaars. So most important roads were from the temple gateways and on these roads there was these roads were lined by bazaar. This was about the roads. Next come the urban core. Urban core of the city. So the city was divided between the royal center, the sacred center, the urban core. These were few important distinguish of the city. Very few ordinary houses have been found in the urban core, and archaeologists have found Chinese porcelain in some areas. So there was Chinese which shows that the northeastern part of the urban core have been occupied by the traders. That means the Chinese porcelain that was used by the traders. So the traders resided here, as it was an object of import, this Chinese porcelain. So basically it was used by the rich traders, and this was also the Muslim residential quarter. This also means that traders might have come here and settled, like the Arab traders. The Arab traders might have settled in the urban core, and tombs and mosques have also been found here, and they had very distinctive function, yet their architecture resembles that of the mandapas that were found in the temples of Hampi. So mosques and tombs have also been found here. but their architecture is different. It is very similar to that of the mandapas that was found in the temples of Hampi. And this description of the urban core was given by the 16th century Portuguese traveller Barbosa. This description of urban core was given by Portuguese traveller Barbosa, who came in 16th century. So, Abdul Razak told us about the 7 lines of forts who had come in 15th century, and about the urban core, about the distinguishment of the city into various sets was told by Barbosa, who a Portuguese traveller who came in 16th century. He also tells us that the entire area was dotted with numerous shrines and small temples. So, around urban core that was dotted means small, like small, numerous shrines and temples were there, small temples were there, which shows that there was prevalence of variety of cults. This shows that there was prevalence of cults was also present, and it might be supported by different communities, as there was presence of different types of communities, people who spoke different languages and who followed different religious traditions. And he also tells that the wells, rainwater tanks as well as temples served as source of water to ordinary town dwellers. So, the rainwater that was conducted to city was for the ordinary town dwellers. The tanks and the temple tanks, it was for ordinary people, except few tanks that supplied water to the royal center. So, this is one part of the Vijayanagara kingdom where we studied about the administration, the geography, topography, and about the society of the Vijayanagara kingdom. In the next part, we will continue the chapter with the architecture and about how the downfall occurred of the empire. And I hope this helps, and happy learning.